Welcome back to my channel. Last time I done a video I said we'll do boundaries, so this is boundaries part 2. You may be around a particular person and when you're around them you find you come away feeling upset, troubled or confused, angered. It could be that when you're around this person you find that your plans get hijacked. You don't get to follow through the things you intended to do. They get sidetracked, your behaviour may change and it's confusing. Emotions come from being around that person that generally speaking can feel quite negative. That might be an indication that you're not getting your needs met from that relationship, or you're not able to let that person know what your needs are in that relationship. Some form of communication hasn't taken place or needs to take place. Our boundaries being broken, not respected, not regarded, not asserted, it then becomes a decision for the person who feels upset to set a boundary or re-examine their boundary. Establishing a boundary is there to keep you safe. Boundaries create less confusion. Boundaries create clarification, and where there's a clarification, there generally tends to be a little bit more ease. Decisions can be made easier, even if it's a boundary that you don't like. At least you know, you've been warned, you've got a heads up, you understand where you can go and where you can't go. Boundaries are going to come up through quite a few things that I'm planning on talking about, because they're just the underpinning of life. You can't avoid it. And we wield so much power over them, personal boundaries, yet it takes some balls to really assert some of them. When you're parenting a child, consequences come into play. If this is done, then the consequence is this. And to back up consequences needs consistency. And that is how you are beginning to form a boundary. So the child knows that when this line is crossed, the consequence is this. And this consistently happens every time that line is crossed. And the consistency is what builds the reinforcement. And the reinforcement supports that boundary that you are trying to establish. If somebody's struggling, like children for example, push boundaries naturally. They need to know what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. During my work as a parent trainer, I like to explain to parents it's like a fruit machine in an arcade. You put money in the fruit machine and you pull it and the wheels spin. And for a child who's going to act out in a certain way, they're going to keep doing that behaviour, pulling that lever, if the parents are going to keep reacting in a certain way because they're getting attention. Any attention is better than no attention for a child or the immature adult. But attention is attention is attention, good or bad, it's attention. And for that child, they're going to keep on doing the thing that gets them the attention. What needs to change is the type of attention. Do you give attention to it? A boundary is what needs to be set in a circumstance like that to change that child's behaviour. You know, there are some exceptions where people have a different set of boundaries. They're not the norm. Say for example, if someone isn't neurotypical, there's a lot of neurodiversity, people have a different view of the world. When you're dealing with somebody who's autistic, boundaries are very important to them. It helps them with their communication and functioning through the world. When there's a lot of vagueness in communication with people who are autistic, if they're not being specific, it can be so confusing for them. It helps to be very clear, set clear boundaries. It supports them through their world. I'd say a good place to start with building boundaries is self-care. Because once you care for yourself, you'll have an understanding and a better idea of how you'd like others to treat you. So if you can be good to yourself, others will follow suit and can be good to you. Speaking to a therapist about any issues you have with boundaries is probably the best place to take boundary issues, really, because that's what the whole relationship's built on, boundaries. They listen to you as you would like a friend to listen to you, but if you really check it, your friend isn't there to just purely listen to your problems. You have to listen to their problems too, and so many other things happen in that friendship. It's a give and take thing, and it's not just about airing out problems. You go out and you socialise, you do social things together. You're not a friend with your therapist. Our job is to help people heal. So that's why I say if there's issues with boundaries or curiosity about your boundaries, things you're not sure about, the best place to go to is therapy. Learning comes from exploring boundaries, identifying boundaries, knowing your boundaries. Where's your limit? Some solutions to strengthening boundaries. If somebody, say for example, has an eating disorder and they're constantly being checking weight, calorie counting, and now Pinterest or TikTok or whatever platform you're on has picked up the algorithm of that, and they keep on sending you that. You may want to change your filters, as in not the lens filter, I mean like the settings. So the algorithm sends different things to your feed, so you're not receiving hurtful things. You may have to go in and change your catches, change something so you have different things sent to you, and you're building that boundary around yourself to keep yourself safe, so you're not seeing the things that trigger an eating disorder. As an example, apart from, I've mentioned therapy, journaling is another good one. If you have a pen and a paper, a notebook, something that you like to put your feelings in, you don't have to do it every day. It depends on how you are. Some people are very creative, they can really articulate, like write what it is they want to say. Me, I'm good at I like conversating a bit more, so I try to articulate what it is I like to say. So, but journaling, what I mean is documenting it. In a sense, me doing these is me capturing my ideas. So what I'm saying is capture your ideas, the thoughts that come in your mind on something that's recordable. Another thing that can shape and build and reinforce boundaries is observation. Can you hang back from somebody or a situation and just observe it? What do you notice? What do you notice about yourself? What do you notice about other people? And from the data that you collect from that observation, what would you change? What would you rearrange? What needs to stay and what needs to go? That can be a way to form and shape boundaries too. It gives you an opportunity to see behaviours, how one person behaves, how another person behaves, how you behave. And behaviours are communication of the highest order, in my opinion. How somebody behaves is how they are communicating to the person in front of them, the people around them, and to themselves. You know, when people have crossed the line and you need to pull back, distance is a good thing. You can love from afar, you can gaze from afar, you can observe from afar. You can still have regard and care for a person that's crossed the boundary, but you don't necessarily have to be in their sphere of reach anymore to put yourself in further harm's way. Being assertive and speaking up is another way to strengthen a boundary. It can be very difficult if you're not used to it. You may become quite self-conscious and worry that the person who you want to tell, the thing you want to tell to, might judge you badly. It could feel really uncomfortable and awkward. At some point, I'd suggest take the leap. Just take the leap and do it and see what comes out the other end. When you want to assert yourself and you're not sure how to go about it, again, you can write it down. You can write a text and not necessarily send it, and have all the things you want to say, and maybe just like kind of bullet point a few things you are really keen on having the other person understand. And You can say it out loud to yourself in a room, you can practice it. If you have a trusted friend, you can try a little bit of role play and see, in that sense, what does this sound like? If your friend's able to listen, they just need to be a sounding board for you. But assertiveness can help reinforce and shape and build some boundaries. To be hard on yourself when a red flag's overlooked and then it becomes a problem down the line. Yeah, at some point you have to learn from mistakes that are made if they become a pattern repeatedly happening, and you're not learning from them, sure, but people come into each other's lives with so many different, in many different ways, and when it mingles up with somebody's hopes, they hope that this person will not be a bad person, they hope that this person will be kind. The hope and the reality can get quite mingled up, and it takes time to really see if what this person is, who they are, what they're like, what you are in relation to them, where it's going. It takes time to kind of be clear about the relationship or the situation you may be in. But when you have clear-cut boundaries and that person doesn't mesh with what your boundaries are, then it's an opportunity to think that, yeah, that red flag could be something I need to act on. Where somebody may be finding it hard to understand their own personal boundaries and set boundaries, I find it's helpful to work with that person on identifying their needs. What do they need from others? What do they need to happen for themselves? And to help that person's confidence grow, and to help their instinct to grow, to have faith in their instinct and to have belief in themselves, because more often than not, we've all come across red flags, things that have irked us and we could have overlooked them. That red flag was a warning sign to say that something isn't right. Potentially down the line, an issue may come up with this very thing and this person. That was the red flag. So after practice with clients, I like to see if they have any awareness of what red flags are and what led them to overlook it, and to just not beat themselves up about it. Really, I read a very good book once by an author called Dana Morningstar, and in her book she explained about a time when she couldn't quite find herself. She didn't know what she liked from what she didn't like. In the book, she was able to rank what are more important to her, things that are really valuable, she wants to keep this item, and things that actually don't mean that much to her, she could give away, and things that actually sit in between both. With situations and relationships and people, you can do a similar thing. We've probably all done that pros and cons list. Sometimes you might get a job, for example, and it's a little bit far, and you weigh out the pros and cons. Could I do it? The pros are this, the cons are this. You can do it to people too. People do it in regards to relationships often. Should I stay, should I go? What are the pros, what are the cons? That there, I'd say, is boundary building, because you are asserting something, you are making a decision about something, whether you commit more, whether you withdraw. That's a boundary. Another way of strengthening boundaries could be to identify areas of your life that require boundaries. For example, finances, time, mental health and well-being, your emotional need, your physical space. And then in that could be other categories. An example I can think of is knocking on the door before entering a room, as opposed to somebody just entering. Your physical space could be literally your physical space around you, touching and people being physical with you intimately or non-intimately. It could be, for example, finances. Do you lend money or do you not lend money? Emotionally, mentally, what can you put up with another, and what do you say, no, actually this isn't something I feel open to sharing about. Somebody might ask you a personal question and it's not up for discussion. It might be something that you want to keep private. So these are ways that you can establish boundaries and identify boundaries and set boundaries. If you can have a think about what is important to you, the parts of your life that you need to know, where you draw the line. Some boundaries are really quite difficult to work with, to manage, to look at, to explore, and it can just be a sticking point for some people, and it can have a lot of history behind why it's a difficult thing to sort out. It's a lifelong work to work out some particular boundaries because they trigger other things. They're attached to so many other things. When there's particular boundaries that are difficult, I'd suggest just don't give up on it. Don't be so hard on yourself. We all have things that are our struggles. I think it's useful to just be aware of it and know that that's a tender place for you. That's a difficult place for you. You're aware that this particular boundary is something you struggle with. So you can take care, self-care. I really appreciate your time with me today. I hope it was useful for you. So hit the notification button and like and subscribe. Boundaries are really important to them. There's a lot of, damn man.
Setting a boundary. No one's perfect.